Hey guys, T-Bull here. Today we're going to be talking about floods and fires. And then I just want to point out this game in the background. I'm not going to be commenting directly on this. This is just a game that there happen to be floods and fires, so I figured it was apropos. So I just want to mention that ahead of time. So for these beginner videos, the series I've been trying to put together since the game came out, I'm trying to give you guys building blocks that are not overly basic, or hopefully have some good information that's not readily apparent, but I'm not trying to give you like the deepest dive and all that stuff. More of that information will come out as time goes on. Um, but in terms of fires and floods, what's a basic building block? What can you say? Don't get set on fire, don't get flooded. Yeah, okay. You needed me to tell you that, right? Um, but the topic's somewhat more complicated than that, but not overly complicated, so I figured it'd probably be a good beginner series video. And just the fact that actually understanding what's going on when your ship's on fire, when it's flooded, that understanding is important. So I figured it'd be a good time to present that information to you. So first I'm going to talk about like the common aspects of fires and floods. Just some individual differences between both of them that I'll go over later. But to start with, basically what you need to understand is each ship has a rating, like a mathematical number that, there's a formula that fires off every time your ship's hit by whatever. Part of that formula is the ship's chance to prevent a fire or a flood, okay? And each torpedo has a given chance to cause a fire or flood. So like ship A, destroyer A, that torpedo will have a different chance to cause a flood than destroyer B. Alright. And I'm not one of those guys that's sitting there with a calculator running quadratic formulas when I'm playing the game, so that stuff doesn't personally interest me. I just want to point it out to you that does exist. And you can kind of do a deeper dive online. The ratings for all that stuff are available for the PC version. It's too early into the console version, the Legends game, for any of that information to be out there yet. But just keep that in mind. I mean, it's good enough for me to say, some ships are more susceptible to being set on fire than others. Some ships are more likely to cause fires than others, okay? And speaking of that, high explosive rounds, it does state the chance to cause a fire on your ship's stats page. So if you go into that when you're looking at the ship, and that is useful to know because that can determine part of your strategy. Like if certain ships have a high chance to cause fires, and then you set up your ship to enhance that, or the crews. I was going to mention that in a minute here, like commanders and certain modules that you can put on your ships can either help prevent or cause fires or floods in certain instances. So you can look at the HE shell's chance to cause a fire, and if it's a high chance, maybe you want to enhance that aspect of your ship's build. Something to keep in mind, but the other numbers, they're a little more esoteric, and you'd have to do some digging around for them. And then what I want to talk about is how the game is treating your ship. So it divides them into zones when it's dealing with fires and floods. What do I mean by that? So for a flood, there's one zone. For fires, there's 4 zones, which basically means you're going to have 1 flood at a time and up to 4 fires at a time on your ship. So if you're struck by a torpedo and your ship begins to flood, that one zone, the 1 out of 1 zone, is now flooded. And so you can't be more flooded, is I guess the point of that. Whereas if you got, like, let's say the very front of your ship's on fire, well, there's 3 other sections that can potentially be set on fire, compounding the fire damage. So I do want to point out that, like, if you're shooting at a guy and the section that your shells are hitting is on fire, those AT shells may do some like penetration damage against that, but it's not going to further cause a fire in that section. So you want to move to like a different. So like right now on the screen, you can see that section was on fire. You know, so I was moving it forward. The guy got smoked by torpedoes, anyways, but I was trying to adjust my aim to further up the ship to potentially cause another fire. So 4 zones for fires. You know, I think they're roughly the same size. So just consider it roughly a quarter of the ship from front to back is each zone. And damage control party is an important concept to understand when you're talking about floods and fires. That's the consumable. You can see it on the screen there, that fire extinguisher and wrench. And how that works is if your ship's on fire or flooded or both, and you hit that, it'll have this 5-second window where there'll be like a green box around it, and it'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. During that time, the fire that was existed or the flood that had existed prior to you hitting it will be gone, and it also protects you from further fire damage or flood damage during that small window. I think it's normally, if not always, 5 seconds. It might change a little bit ship to ship, but it's usually 5. And then after that, there's like a longer cooldown where you can't use damage party again until that number resets. So keep that in mind. And then I just wanted to mention what both of them are acting against your HP bar, and it's calculated by your base HP. So it's not damaging modules or ship's parts or anything like that. It's acting directly against your ship's health. Now, how it's calculated is by your base HP. So what your HP is at the beginning of the match, that's your base HP. So you can see, looking at this match, 10,000. That's my base HP on the right. Now my current HP happens to be 10,000 too because I haven't been hit yet. But if it was 5,000, we'd be using the 10,000 number to calculate it. So now let's actually get into what's going on with the flood. So flooding is damaging 0.667% of your max base HP. So again, in this case, the 10,000, no matter what my current ship's health is, it's 0.66% of that 10,000 number. For 90 seconds is the duration of a flood if it's not treated. So if you have a flood and you don't deal with it, you're going to lose 60% of your total base HP for the full duration of that flood. So again, let's say I got 5,000 current HP. If I don't deal with that flood, they don't have to touch me for the rest of the game. I'm dead. I'm sunk. Because that 6,000 is 60% of my total base HP of the 10,000. So 5,000 minus 6,000 is a negative number, which means dead. Alright. So you do want to deal with these things, which is why I'm bringing it up as part of the beginner series videos, because I think it's kind of obvious if you're on fire you want to deal with it, but I don't know how readily apparent it is just how big of a crisis it is, because most people are putting them out as soon as they can. So you know, and the only way to find out exactly how dangerous these floods are or the fires are is to actually sit there and not treat them, and by that point you're in deep trouble anyways. So that's the main reason I made this video, just to help you out with this information. Flooding is primarily caused by torpedo hits, would be almost all the floods you're going to see. You can cause a flood by ramming someone, which isn't really in my current bag of tricks, but I suppose as my game evolves, maybe I'll try and ram more people. But currently I try and not run into other people. And then I do want to point out, again, we don't really have a good way to look at each ship's armor setup, but some ships do have like built-in, there's layers of armor on all these ships, and some of them have like anti-flooding zones. Typically those are concentrated in the middle. Like if you watch that video we put up on Citadels, think about the same zone there. So if you're trying to cause a flood, you want to shoot for like the front or the back of the ship. And I get it, you're thinking, oh yeah, when are you not trying to cause a flood when you're shooting someone with a torpedo? But like, let's just look at this example, like, and this is like the sort of thinking that will continue to evolve and improve for you as you gain more experience. Like that guy right there, he's on fire. Now, let's say he puts that out. Now I know he's burned his damage control party, right? So now, if the choice comes down to like AP or HE, like, well, let's try and set him on fire again. Let's try and flood him, because we know he can't fix that flood for a while, or that fire for a while, and then he's in trouble, you know? So, you know, a fire that... setting a fire on the ship's always good, but if they put it out right away, maybe in that instance the AP shot would have been better. But if they can't put it out, then you know that longevity, you know, that damage dealt over time is going to be better. So keep that in mind. Fires are similar in a lot of ways, which we covered. I do want to point out they can only be started by direct hits from HE, not like splash damage. So like if the HE shell hit like the beach that he was moored on, that one actually caused a fire. You have to actually hit the ship. Air bombs, which I don't believe we have in the game, but like aircraft carriers, you'll see air bombs being dropped. There may be some ship down the line that has a deck bomber on it, I don't know, but primarily HE shells. The damage for fires, it's going to be 0.3% again of your total health per second for all the ships that are currently in the game. When they put the aircraft carriers in, if they keep them set up as they are, it's 4% per second, 0.4% for aircraft carriers. And then destroyers and cruisers, the duration of fire is 30 seconds. Battleships and potentially aircraft carriers, if you're watching this in the future, 60 seconds. So, full duration of a fire, 9% of your total hit points for cruisers and destroyers, 18% for battleships, potentially 24% for carriers per fire. One fire you can deal with, multiple fires you begin to have a serious problem. If you have 4 fires on your ship, you're fucked. Alright. There's no other way to put it. And then I think I mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to reiterate it, that fires are not being extended by hitting a section that's already on fire. You're not going to increase any fire to that ship by hitting that same section with more HE. You got to move on to a new section. And we're going to cover vision mechanics. That's more of a very deep dive type of topic, so I'm kind of trying to figure out how to do a basic version. But we'll do a vision video soon. Fires increase the range that you're detectable at by 2 kilometers. Alright, so the takeaway is, if you're on fire, you're more visible to the enemy, but try and keep that 2 kilometer number in mind, just because you are going to want to master the vision game in this. If you're from World Tanks and you knew what you're doing, you probably understand how important the vision game is, at least potentially. I'm not saying you have to play that style, but I particularly like to work on the vision game in both games. So again, we will get more into that in the future, but I just want you to keep in mind that if you're on fire, you are more detectable. So I hope that was helpful. If you liked the video, please hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Questions, comments, leave them below. I want to hear what you got to say. I'll try and respond to you guys as best I can. And we'll see you soon for more World of Warships. Peace!